Hello everyone, my name is Jean Villedieu, and today I will be doing a presentation about fight crime with next generation analytics, how to detect fraud networks faster. So in today's presentation, I will share a tale of a paradigm shift. I will walk you through how organizations, or one organization evolved from a siloed approach to anti-fraud to a more holistic one, and what was the impact of that change. So this story is based on a successful partnership between BforBank and Linkurious, the company I'm a co-founder of. First, I will present BforBank, talk a little bit about the bank, and then I'll discuss how silos create issues for anti-fraud teams. And finally, I'll present how BforBank used Linkurious Enterprise to move to a graph approach. So for those of you who are not familiar with BforBank, it's a French digital bank. It's owned by Groupe Crédit Agricole, one of Europe's leading banks. As a topic for a case study, it's interesting because in some regards, it has the agility of a neobank, and at the same time, it has the resources of a much larger one. So a few years ago, when our story starts, and when we first met BforBank, that data was fairly siloed. So different business domains had led to different apps, different teams, and different databases. Definitely not an unusual picture in the financial industry. Of course, the reality of things is sometimes a little bit different. A client in the retail bank database can be linked to an address mentioned in a data set from a third-party data source, such as Check, for example, or can be linked to an IP address that visits the bank's website. And in a siloed world, it's very hard to connect all of those dots. And there's actually a bit of a paradox here. When looking at what happens within a specific silo, things tend to make a lot of sense. The data about the retail bank clients is available to the people working in retail banking via apps they have access to. So if not individually, at least as a group. As a result, if a fraud analyst needs to investigate a particular client, accessing all the information about that client in the silo is fairly quick. Just a matter of minutes and using maybe one, potentially two apps. There are also rules in place to detect suspicious behaviors within the particular data silo. But what happens if there are also information relevant for fraud detection and investigations in other data silos? Then there's a need to do some lateral thinking, and that's where things get very complicated very quickly. At BforBank, for example, when fraud analysts needed data not directly accessible via their tools, they needed to coordinate with colleagues to get access to the data. Then they would receive raw data and need to consolidate it via Excel with the existing data. Furthermore, the fraud rules were focused on the KYC data and the transactions, and they were not leveraging external information about cyber activity, for example. And that siloed approach, it can work, and it did work well overall for BforBank. But at the same time, it created some difficulties for fraud patterns and investigations that require a broad picture of the client's activity. And one very concrete example of that is phishing attacks. So what is a phishing attack? Here you have a bit of a schema that presents that. It typically happens with an attacker who sends an email to his victims that directs the victims to a fake website that looks very similar to another website which it's impersonating, and that fake website is used to recover the credentials from the victim. So typically, the attacker sends an email linking the victim to a fake page where the victim thinks he's accessing his bank account when really is just giving his credentials to an attacker who can then reuse the information. So why fighting back against phishing attacks is complex. An attack could pop up on the radar of the compliance team as a new beneficiary and immediate withdrawals, or it could pop up in the IT's radar via IP addresses accessing unusual accounts. And in both cases, there's a need at some point to pivot from one domain to another. And this can be to understand, for example, the financial transactions behind some unusual connections, or it can be to understand the recent online connections behind a set of unusual transactions. in the case of phishing attacks for BforBank, they were very much experimented all the issues associated with lateral thinking that we just mentioned. So what does it mean in practice? I think there were three big problems with that type of a phishing attack. First, there was an issue with ineffective identification of the fraudulent behaviors. Then it was very much harder to identify the scope of and the spread of a given attack. And finally, the entire process, as it was fairly manual and involved communication across departments, was wasting a lot of people's times and resources. So this is, the big problems that came with the siloed approach. So to tackle this issue, BforBank identified the need to rethink the way the fraud and compliance teams understand its clients. And the goal was to move towards a 360-degree view of the client. What became quickly apparent for the analytics team at BforBank was that the best way to accomplish that was to start thinking about clients not as isolated entities, but to think about them as a network where clients can be connected to one another across things such as transactions, emails, IP addresses, phone numbers, and more. So it was very much a paradigm shift. And BforBank partnered with Linkurious to accelerate that journey toward a 360-degree view of their clients. So BforBank used Linkurious Enterprise, or investigation platform that leverages graph analytics to accelerate investigations and detect suspicious patterns other solutions simply cannot identify. Linkurious Enterprise is used today by thousands of analysts throughout the world to stop fraud and money laundering networks. I would like to mention a little bit how the process happened. So it all started with gathering and identifying the relevant data sources for the needs of the fraud and compliance team. Then there was a new database that was set up, a graph database, specially dedicated to the analysis of connections within complex data sets. So a graph expert helped the fraud and compliance team structure the data as a graph in a Neo4j database. And then the Linkurious Enterprise software was first installed and configured fine-tuned to address the needs of BforBank. Finally, once the software is configured, it can be leveraged very easily via a simple web browser by anyone without having to learn a new query language or to become a data guru. So it was, all in all, a very simple and straightforward process, I would say. So we can't really share any data from BforBank, obviously, about the type of investigations and how they are using the software day in, day out. So what I would like to do to give you a bit of an example of how Linkurious Enterprise works is to illustrate that with another use case. And here I'm going to be using the FinCEN files investigation. So the FinCEN files, for those of you who haven't heard of it yet, is a big investigation that was conducted by the International Consortium of Data Journalists in partnership with BuzzFeed and tens of news organizations throughout the world. And all of these journalists investigated data that was leaked from FinCEN. And specifically, they investigated suspicious activity reports. And they dived into this information using Linkurious Enterprise. And with the help of the software, they were able to come up with a lot of stories regarding how different crooks, different career criminals are actually using today the international financial system to launder money. For those of you who are more interested in this topic, you can look online the FinCEN files and learn more about the involvement of link your use in this process and about the state of AML today. So that's it for today's presentation. What I want to stress now is the sort of results that BforBank was able to accomplish at the end of the day. What they uncovered is that the investigations were accelerated by a factor of 5x. So it was very significant improvement for the fraud and compliance investigations, and they also estimated that they managed to increase the number of verified fraud cases detected by 20%. So both the speed of the investigations and the actual number of verified fraud cases that were identified were significantly impacted by this shift from a siloed approach to anti-fraud to a more holistic approach supported by the curious enterprise. If you want to learn more about the use case or about linker use and linkers enterprise, you can either visit our virtual booth today, or you can visit linkerio.us, our website, or even drop us an email at contact@linkerio.us. Thank you very much for your time. Have a lovely day. Bye.